Well, welcome to Straight Shooting News. I'm your host, Bandana Red, and tonight our show is going to be Distractions, the Biscuit, the Raid, Federal Government, CDC cover-up, and Rand Paul hearings. So tonight we are coming to you from the Merrimack Valley in Massachusetts, where the shot heard round the world was fired, and at the Concord Bridge and the revolution against tyranny would change the world and gave birth to new guidelines and how the human race would be ruled or not be ruled by kings, queens, dictators, emperors, or czars, or secret organizations, as we're going to cover tonight, because we're going to take a deep dive into what is known as the Biscuit. And we're going to connect to the area from where we're broadcasting and the significance of what you see taking place in front of your eyes of what took place here so many years ago and over the last so many decades. And saying that, we have no time for the carnival barkers taking advantage of street talkers. And yes, they are howling, and they are everywhere. And right now, we should be uniting. We need to unite. We have forces that are against we the people, trying to force us into division, civil wars. And some people are just building on it. Some people are just profiting on it. And there are others have some alternative thoughts in their head that they're going to try to use to their advantage, manipulate people who have goodwill, good intentions. We'll move into more of that. So tonight, what we have is the first part, we're going to have the federal government that, according to the Constitution, is designed to protect national security. But what are they really protecting? Then part two, we're going to have the CDC and more, and they're going to see connections to what they're trying to do. By the end of part two, you should completely understand what's going on. In part three, we're going to try to get to tonight, if we have time, the Rand Paul's hearings, when it really set off this whole deep state movement, when they want to find out the origins and the reason and where the funding and why the funding was given to launch an attack on the whole world. That should be eye-opening. We're going to start tonight with a couple of short clips from mainstream media. Then we're going to take a deep dive with DJ, the dark journalist, who finally put the pieces together through the research about things that we've already known about, many of us, but you may not. So we usually stress here, we should try to give you more of the mainstream outlook that everyone's looking at. But when we find a unique piece that can put all the dots, connect them all together, to hopefully that even those who haven't been paying close attention can relate to what they're seeing taking place and going, what the heck's going on here? We found it tonight. DJ did a great show on Friday night. Fans, a big shout out to him. So in saying that, let's start with the first two short clips, and then we're going to look into what is called the Biscuit with DJ. All right, roll that first clip.
your screen. New video showing Border Patrol agents literally opening up a gate previously locked by the Texas National Guard in order to allow illegal immigrants to come into the U.S. So as Texas authorities try to secure our southern border, Team Biden, oh, they're right there to invite them in illegally, and they get involved in, human trafficking. And it's just one of the many reasons why a new poll is finding that a majority of Americans see this as an invasion of our southern border. And meanwhile, in New York City, officials are getting just a small little glimpse of what border communities are suffering from every single day. New York City is now begging for an extra 5,000 hotel rooms to house the migrants being bused to the city by the Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Great move, Governor. Here with reaction, Border Patrol Union President Brandon Judd, along with Fox News contributor Sarah Carter. Sarah, let's start with your report first. You've been down there for us many times reporting.
Oh, yes, Sean. And I just returned this week from a week, actually, in Central America. And the situation is becoming very grave. I got information from sources, both in El Salvador as well as Guatemala, that many people are pouring in from across the globe into Honduras. I spoke with people actually along the border, as well as senior officials in both governments, and spoke to these folks that were coming across and asked them, why were they willing to take such a risk, even with children as young as 1 year old, babies coming across 3 different nations. And they said, well, Biden has the border wide open. We've talked to our family members. We've talked to friends who have actually made their way in. So when you look at that video of, the Border Patrol agents opening that gate, Sean, this is not just a one-time thing. This is kind of an overall picture of what is happening at our border, and people from across the world are actually hearing it loud and clear. And if you think it's bad now, just wait until the next fiscal year, because they're expecting millions of people to make this trek into the United States. This is just the beginning of something really terrible.
Did you see that clip? Did you see the clip of the Texas National Guard standing there while the Border Patrol comes in, unlocks a gate, and just lets illegals right in? What's going on here? Why is the Border Patrol so willing to participate in this invasion? Hopefully by the end of tonight's show, this here, the Constitution, national security, all the issues we're going to cover, and what this stands is going to have a new significance to you and a new meaning of why we must all defend and protect. We keep showing you this every week since our first show on. But tonight, you're going to see a meaning. So let's take a look here. I mean, it's criminal what's going on. I mean, basically, the National Guard took an oath to defend the U.S. Constitution. What is it that the U.S. Border Patrol doesn't understand about national security? Now, let's hear the second part of that interview, and we'll give you a few more questions to ponder in your head. You're going to hear from Brandon Judd, the union head for the Border Patrol agents. Roll that.
Brandon, what are the rank and file on the ground saying that they're dealing with every day? Now, we haven't even brought into the equation 90% of America's heroin crossing that border and 95% of fentanyl crossing that border, or the fact that we lose about 300 American kids each week because of these drugs. What are the rank and file saying? They're not allowed to do their job. They have to offer preferential treatment to people entering this country illegally, breaking our laws, not respecting our border or sovereignty. Then they get a free Biden phone and transportation to the state of their choice. And on top of it, there's no COVID testing. There's no vaccine mandate for these illegal immigrants. What is going on here?
Yeah, every single one of us are beyond upset. When you look back at President Trump's administration, he not only gave us the infrastructure, but he also gave us the policy. When you look at that video and when you see that gate, those fences were made to stop people from evading apprehension. Unfortunately, those people were in the United States. They already made an illegal entry. They already committed a crime. So we had to take them into custody. That's why you're seeing them open the gate to take them into custody, because they already committed that crime. And that stopped. That didn't happen under President Trump because he gave us the policy as well. When you see that, that clearly shows how bad the Biden administration's policies are, that we take people into custody and they're able to congregate behind that fence because they know that ultimately they're going to be released into the United States. Even though we took them into custody, we're going to take them back to the Border Patrol station. We're going to process them and ultimately release them or give them a reward. And that's why we have to have both. We have to have both the technology, the infrastructure and the policy, and that's what Trump gave us, and Biden has gotten rid of all of it. And that's the problem, and that's why we're so demoralized right now in this time.
Also have to look at the national security implications. Just like you said, Sean, we're seeing just over the weekend 600 known gotaways. Those are people that just disappeared into our country over one weekend from one area that we know now have disappeared into our nation. Fentanyl coming across, and I don't know if people have seen these reports, but now they're seeing fentanyl coming across that looks like candy. So the pills actually look like candy. So if your children see them, they might think that they're a Skittles or something like that. They're very colorful, rainbow colors. They're getting those at the border. This is an extremely dangerous situation for our nation. It's an extremely dangerous situation for those in poverty that are taking this route into the United States. And the only people that are particularly benefiting are these drug cartels and these human traffickers who are amassing hundreds of billions of dollars off of the death of our children and off of the death of these migrants.
Here you go. Everything you just said pertains to this. Everything you just heard pertains to this. The federal government is responsible for our national security. I don't know what the hell it is that these Border Patrol agents don't understand. Enough of this rank and file bullshit, because that's all it is. The rank and file are accomplices to the crimes against the Constitution, against the people. They do not have to obey unconstitutional orders. It's in their oath. He's talking about, he wants more funding and more resources for what? To become a better welcome wagon? What's with you Border Patrol agents and Brandon Judd and that freaking union don't understand? This is our country. And when are you going to speak up, people? You're going to wait till you lose a child or a friend or someone you love to fentanyl? And we know it's coming in from our enemies. So it's not just a national security issue, because China's responsible for pushing it in. It's goddamn treason. They declared war on us. Why are you all in denial? Demoralization. Seriously, demoralization. These are the federal employees that we pay good money and tax money to defend our national security. And they're demoralized? Seriously, Brandon? It's time to stop being nice about all this. Right down to everybody who's employed by the federal government that's not speaking up or standing up to unconstitutional orders. We told you this is going to play a big part tonight. All right? So, do your job or get out of the way and let the National Guard deal with it under the direction of the state governors, which is allowed by what is known to our founders as the organized militia, which is actually the National Guard of each state, which is different from the unorganized militia. We've explained that over and over. So it's not just the border guard. So let's not just go heavy on them tonight. Let's listen to, this is a clip from Victor Davis Hanson, highly accredited historian. And he speaks about these other federal agencies. And I want you to listen to him closely. I don't care what party you're with. This is now getting to be part of your national security and your quality of life and your well-being. Roll this next clip with Victor Davis Hanson.
Well, the FBI's narrative on the conservative side is something like this. There is a toxic hierarchy of careerists that run the FBI, and they rotate in and out of the FBI, and they go into private enterprise, and they condition or massage their ideology to fit their own career trajectories. So they want to be on a corporate board, or they want to be a lobbyist, or they want to be a lawyer, and they get great jobs, and they want to be loved by the media. If you're Andrew McCabe, you want to be on MSNBC as an analyst. If you're James Comey, seeing that kind of stuff. But they don't represent the rank and file, because we all, like you, know them and we love them. Yes, sort of. But my problem with that is, who were the people down there in Michigan that were hiring FBI informants to egg on a bunch of nuts to kidnap the governor of Michigan? Who was Peter Strzok? Who was Lisa Page? Who was Kevin Kleinsmith? I mean, he was a lowly lawyer, right? That felt that he could just doctor with impunity a federal FISA application. So when I look at these people that do these things, who are the people that, I mean, they sent Peter Strzok over to interview Flynn, ha ha ha. So I don't believe it's just the hierarchy. I believe the hierarchy has permeated its values all the way through the FBI. And there's wonderful people there, but they understand that they're not going to be promoted or recognized unless they toe a particular line. So yeah, I'm worried about it. And so, do we have a lot of investigatory intelligence police bureaus? Yeah, so why not break it up? So we could take all of those who are worried about entrance of foreign agents, perhaps, terrorism or undercover espionage thing, and we can give them to Homeland Security. There's a lot of FBI people that go after counterfeiting or currency violation, give them the Department of Treasury. We have a lot of them who deal with, they work with the Pentagon, put a division with the Pentagon, and just take the entire agency and disperse it throughout the federal government, and then take that building and let other people use it in Washington. But this idea, a federal bureau of investigation, you have too much power, and its record is too dangerous to democracy. The left always says democracy dies in darkness. This thing is, right now, at this moment, the FBI is one of the great threats to democracy. And what do I mean by that? It's a terrible thing to say, but think of what I'm saying. Do they intervene in elections? Yes. They hired a foreign national spy who illegally was working. You can't do that if you're a foreigner, work for a campaign. He was basically being paid by Hillary Clinton, GPS, DNC paywalls, Perkins Coie. They hired him. They tried to spread a dossier. They ruined the life of Carter Page. They went after Papadopoulos. They tried to destroy Michael Flynn. Their leaders, when asked to explain what was going on, lied. Andrew McCabe lied to federal investigators. James Comey pled amnesia. He broke the law, and he disseminated confidential memos. So what I'm getting at is they tried to affect that election. The next election, in 2020, they tried to affect it. They had a laptop. The person said, "This laptop was given to me by Hunter Biden. I looked at it. I think it's pretty serious." He made a copy of some of the materials on it. They gave it to the FBI. The FBI had it in its possession, said, "We're not going to talk about it." But when 50 intelligence officers did want to talk about it, on no basis, and said, "Looks to us like Russian disinformation." They were asked, "Well, you have the laptop. Could you call?" No. they were affecting an election. Because after the election was over and the narrative changed and that Joe Biden suddenly by 2022 was a liability, guess what? Stuff started to come out about the laptop. We started to get leaks about it, and that could come from the FBI. And the FBI went after, as I said earlier, Roger Stone or James O'Keefe. They don't do that with left wing. So they interfere in elections. Do the directors lie? Yes, I just mentioned two of them. They lie. Do the directors, they lie under oath? Mueller lied when he said he didn't know what Fusion GPS or the Steele dossier. McCabe admitted he lied 4 times. Comey basically lied when if I said to the IRS, they came here and said, Mr. Hansen, we can't find $20,000 of the write-offs you took. Where are they? And I'd say, I can't remember. You know, I'm not going to address that. Well, do you have any records? I can't remember. Well, that's lying. And that's what Comey did. And so my point is that, do they have people that destroy evidence? Yes. Kleinsmith did. Comey. Mueller did. I mean, they asked for FBI phones, critical. They erased them. So when you have an agency that has gone rogue and is interfering at the highest level of the country to affect an election, and they are willing, the directors of those agencies are willing to alter or leak documents that they shouldn't, or lie under oath to federal investigators, or lie to a committee that by claiming amnesia, and they oversee a bureau that will wipe clean phone records that are under subpoena, or they will not prosecute one person but they will another, then it's institutionalized, and you've got to get rid of it. I think you do. This idea that once you have a bureau, you'll always have it, I don't understand that. It's so ironic because we're all in this era of, we're not J. Edgar Hoover, but we think that J. Edgar Hoover polluted the wonderful idea of the FBI. It may have been all along that the FBI's pernicious idea polluted J. Edgar Hoover. That is, in a democracy, in a constitutional republic, do you really want a national federal police force, a Stasi-like, a Gestapo? There's no need for it. We have a federal system, the states have it, and we have cabinet bureaus that are equipped to go across state lines for matters of immigration or terrorism or currency in Treasury and Homeland Security, except at DOJ. We can do that. But we don't need this massive behemoth that is out of control. You can really see it when you look at the directors. What was the one common denominator in the last 4 during their testimony? When they had Mueller come in and they asked him about the Steele dossier, he went like this, I don't know. You don't know? That was your entire 22 months and 40 million budget. It was based on the dossier and the GPS information. I don't know. And they let him off. And then when they had Comey, he said, I can't remember. And then when he went to a private group to push his book, he could remember very well because he said, let me tell you how we got Mike Flynn. You know, we just kind of walked in there. They usually want to check. They didn't check. So I said, send him in. And we got the guy. I said, what were you looking at? We were looking for the Logan Act violation. Logan Act's never been prosecuted. And so, and then you look at McCabe and, you know, did you say that? Yeah, I misled this. I didn't tell the truth. I shouldn't have done that. I didn't. And Ray, I'm not going to. What do you think of the word? I wouldn't use that word Russian collusion hoax. I wouldn't use the word hoax. I wouldn't use this about the bar. I wouldn't say this. You know, I have an appointment and I got to get out of here. Grassley says, well, we gave you a Gulfstream luxury jet. Can't you give us 10 more minutes? No, he couldn't. He had to go to his vacation home. So they are completely out of control.
They are completely out of control. This is what prevents them from being completely out of control. Our own federal government is working against we the people, and we're funding it. So once again, who the hell are the rank and file? They're just more highly paid toadies for some deep state conspiracy against we the people. These are willing enforcers that act against the U.S. Constitution. They're even committing, by the Constitution, sedition. And we have the evidence. Victor just spelled it out for you of what they're doing. Playing stupid. Ignorance is no defense for breaking the law. We know the hierarchy. They know they're violating the law. And here again, just like the Border Patrol, the rank and file are complacent, and they're also breaking the law. You know, most alarming about all this is these are the same people that the government claims are going to protect us and our nation. And they expect we, the people, to comply with things like their gun laws and restrictions. What we're seeing take place is a whole new meaning and enforces the wisdom and understanding of our founders and the brevity of the Second Amendment and the significance of shall not be infringed. Now, we put together, just to mention, we put together a bullseye this week with more from Victor Davis Hanson and a couple of other clips in there about where they're taking us and what their intentions are from a CIA agent. And we encourage you to take that short clip and start educating your friends and family and people you care about. Because this is what's at stake. Now, if you don't believe us, all I'm going to say is, if we haven't convinced you yet, how's that? That's probably a better way to put it. Get your diving mask on, because now we're going to take a deep dive with the dark journalist. And we're going to find out about what is this biscuit referenced on January 18th of 2021. And he got the research and we'll be showing it to you. And what it all has to do with the Mar-a-Lago invasion. Don't get lost. Stay with us, because we will go back and play the lead up of what President Trump was up to prior to January 18, 2021. How Cheney, both Liz and Dick, play into this whole thing. I want you to watch this and pay attention closely. This is extremely important. This is why we're going to take the deep dive with DJ. Go for it. Roll that.
Before Trump left office, there were outliers. There were points of reference that are going to tell us what's going to happen to him when he leaves. And part of it is about this national defense trinket. It's this special piece of classified something that he has. And this one liberal, leading voice is calling it a biscuit. So Mark Ambinder, he goes into a whole thing about these different scenarios with Trump at the end and, what's going on with the transition and Trump not cooperating and all this stuff, which in fact, Trump did cooperate. Exactly. He talked a good game on top that, I'm fighting through the courts and all that stuff, but he did everything in the background working so that the Biden administration could take over. But listen carefully to this. This is a tweet now from January 18th, 2021, 2 days before Biden takes over. The end state is continuity of government. Trump's military aide in Florida will probably fly back to D.C. sometime that evening. If Trump doesn't want to give back his biscuit, ... classified as an object at the top secret NC2 ESI FRD level, he becomes liable for its keeping. This is exactly where we are with the FBI raid. This thing, whatever this guy is referencing, January 18th, 2021, is exactly, he knows what's going to happen.
Now, if you look at that, he's referencing a biscuit. And most of us who heard that at the time thought they were talking about the nuclear football. But it appears to be much more that some of us knew about, but most people were still kind of like teetering on the fence. We're going to let DJ continue here. Then we're going to make some connections to this area of the country and why it's important and what it has to do with Trump.
How did they know? Well, the word has got out that Trump has something that they want. And he's saying, well, if it ends up that he takes it with him, then it's going to be up to him. It's his responsibility. And if anything happens to it, then damn it, we're going to know who to blame. And, you know, if he has it, then, you know, he's basically, the suggestion here is that he's going to have this thing, this biscuit. And it's so high level important that if he doesn't give it back, then he's responsible for it. And then ultimately the inference is he has something he shouldn't have. They don't say what it is. Let's move to this. Space Force takes over all military satellite communications. That's new. Suddenly, the Space Force, which had been ignored and all this stuff, the Biden administration had these different press people who would actually make jokes about it, like Space Force, ha ha ha, you know, even though it was the new branch of the armed services and all the rest. And the Biden administration didn't like it. They even thought about scrapping it, but they couldn't. So they decided to go with it anyway. But now, in a huge reversal around all that, Space Force takes over all the satellites. All military satellites are now under Space Force control. Now that's interesting for a few reasons. They must have felt confident in doing that. Or this may have been something that Trump built into that system, which is after 18 months of the Space Force, it becomes its own entity. But whatever it happens to be, there's something going on there with space and the telecommunications. Yeah, turns out. But remember who's hanging out in the background? General Van Herk. Hey, it's our Northcom commander. He takes over. He's numero uno if they push the COG button. But remember, he's in charge of NORAD and he's in charge of Northcom. Northcom didn't exist before 9/11, by the way. Now they run us, essentially. So let's get a couple of background pieces going deep on these continuity of government emergency powers programs. Watch this, though. This is Professor Scott, who speaks of the deep state and continuity of government. Never meant the deep state researchers have so much to teach the UFO researchers. The UFO research field is a disaster in that sense because they don't understand the whole thing about government secrecy, even though they're in the UFO field. You know, I mean, they use it as a tagline once in a while, but they don't understand how assassination or any of these other things work. So you need that deep state knowledge. I think one of the things, there's a big gap right now between deep state understanding, the people who understand the whole Kennedy assassination and its many, all the children of that act, and the deep events that have taken place in American history. And then if you understand that, and then you go into the UFO file, then things open up. But if you just look at the UFO file absent the deep state assassination research, you're lost. And the CIA shows up and says, here's disclosure, here's Llewellyn. All right, Peter Dale Scott. One factor linking Dallas, Watergate, Iran-Contra, and 9/11 has been the involvement in all four deep events of personnel involved in America's highest level planning, known since the 1950s as continuity of government, COG. Planning, or more colloquially, inside the Pentagon as the Doomsday Project. A few of these actors may have been located at the top as overseers of the secret COG system, and others, including some I shall talk about today, were located further down in the secret communications network. I see this planning group as one among many in what I've chosen to call the American deep state, along with agencies like the CIA and the NSA. And he goes on about powerful banks. But he says, if only one group among many, the COG planning group is also special because of its control of and access to a communication not under government control. That can reach deeply into the U.S. social structure. I discuss these matters at some length in my next book, American Deep State. COG planning was originally authorized by Truman and Eisenhower as planning for a response to a crippling atomic attack that had decapitated the government. In consequence, its planning group contemplated extreme measures, including what Alfonso Ciardi in 1987 called suspension of the Constitution. My question today is whether the network could have been similarly misused in November 1963. It's certain that the COG emergency network program survived North's demise and continued to be secretly developed for decades at a cost of billions, and was overseen by a team including Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld. Now remember, this is them out of government overseeing it and then coming back into government and activating it during 9/11. It's relevant that these two men's presence on the committee spanned three administrations, those of Reagan's, Bush 1, and Clinton, even though at one point under the Clinton administration, neither man held a position inside the U.S. government. They were private citizens running corporations. Such continuity was essential for a group so secret that few records exist even of its activities. We don't know really anything about it. On 9/11, COG plans were officially implemented for the first time by Vice President Cheney and Defense Secretary Rumsfeld. The two men had planned them for so many years. In the case of the JFK assassination, I wish to focus on two men who functioned as part of the communications network of the Office of Emergency Planning, OEP. The agency renamed in 1968 as the Office of Emergency Preparedness. Renamed again in 1982 as the National Program Office, for which Oliver North was the action officer. These two men, and there are others, such as Winston Lawson, the Secret Service advance man who from the lead car in the motorcade was in charge of the Secret Service. That is a shot of Secret Service agent Winston Lawson with President Kennedy. Lawson has drawn critical attention to JFK researchers, both for dubious actions he took before and during the assassination, and also for false statements he made, some under oath. For example, Lawson reported that during the assassination, motorcycles were deployed to the right and left flank of the president's car, which is completely untrue. On the morning of November 22nd, however, the orders had been changed so that the motorcycles rode instead, as Lawson himself testified, just back of the president's car. Captain Lawrence of the Dallas Police testified that the proposed side escorts were redeployed to the rear on Lawson's own instructions. So he knew, because he was the one who said, no, place them back there. This would appear to have left the president more vulnerable to possible crossfire. Early on November 22nd at Love Field, Lawson installed what would become the lead car, in that lead car, the base radio, whose frequencies were used by all Secret Service agents in the motorcade. The radio channel operated by the White House Communications Agency was used for some key decisions before and after the assassination, yet its records, unlike those of the Dallas Police Department, channels 1 and 2, were never made available for any investigation. The tape was not withheld because it was irrelevant. On the contrary, it contained very significant information. The White House Communications Office reports to this day on its website that the agency was a key player in documenting the assassination of President Kennedy. However, it's not clear for whom this documentation was conducted or why it was not made available to the Warren Commission, House Select Committee, or the Assassination Records Review Board as it should have been. Well, interestingly enough, Winston Lawson was using that Doomsday network when he set up the Dallas motorcade route, and he was using that secret emergency network during the whole assassination process, which was unusual because the Secret Service had their own network. So again, we're left with this question, COG and its personnel involved all the way back to the Kennedy assassination. And when we see Liz Cheney touted as the next president, and we know Dick Cheney set up the 80s version that we have now, which has grown and grown, of continuity of government, we have to start looking at this again. Some interesting connection.
Now, what did he just tell us? What was DJ trying to explain to us? This goes deep, so let me see if I can clear some of the fog away for you. We're talking about this biscuit. And that Trump has something, but what is it? Did Trump build something in? We're going to show you some on that coming up. Or is it, what does Trump know? To put it in perspective, many of us thought at the time, like I said earlier, that what they were talking about that Trump had was nuclear football, and they were afraid he wouldn't give it back. But let's make a couple of connections here. Continuity of government, the Doomsday. We're all talking about suspending the Constitution. And what you're going to see coming up is the explanation of who takes charge, and that was he's talking about, the NORAD commander, despite what Democrats think. So this is going to get really convoluted, and you really have to turn around and put this thing together. But let's make another connection here. Trump's uncle, John Trump, all right, he was involved with the deep state. He was involved with a lot of these people. He actually groomed one of the Bushes. He died in 1983. And he was from Watertown, Massachusetts. Here's where this area of the country comes into play. Because at that time, in Massachusetts, we had a lot of defense industries for years. Okay, we had industries like Raytheon, Honeywell, GE, a lot of big money. There's a lot of questions that surround how far people would go to protect that money in that industry. There's some kind of shadow government. What you're going to hear next is how Trump was actually going after the swamp. And let's play that, and then we'll stop for another quick discussion. Roll that.
I think, this Troop Hemingway piece and why he's given so much power is basically a 21-year-old kid at the end of the Trump administration. And there are articles that I've been reading about them, the way that they went in and switched people out. And they were definitely ruthless about getting rid of these people who were honeycombed throughout these different organizations. Now, a story came out recently which connects up to this, and here's how it goes. Trump had created something at the end of his administration, thinking he was going to get reelected, and the idea was, I can get rid of all of these different people who are career bureaucrats in this structure, and part of that is the continuity of government structure. So, scoop, 2024 GOP hopefuls back Trump's plan to purge civil servants. That's right. Trump's going to get rid of everybody. Okay, let's see what he's up to here. Trump need not win his party's nomination nor ever run again for the next GOP president to try to reimpose executive order known as Schedule F. Schedule F. Democrats increasingly concerned are scrambling to block that possibility. These moves follow Axios' publication last month. Okay, Axios is a hardcore left-wing publication, and they're always on Trump's heels or anybody else who's not a leftist. Okay, an in-depth series by Jonathan Swan detailing how allies of the former president are already plotting the return of Schedule F in 2025, where Trump reelected. And I'm sure this Troop Hemingway is right in the thick of that. Now, driving the news, 6 Senate Democrats led by Tim Kaine, you remember that wonderful vice president wannabe with Hillary Clinton, introduced legislation on Tuesday to secure the civil service to protect career officials against future efforts to reimpose deeply controversial Trump-era orders, which were rescinded by President Biden at the start of his term. I guarantee you one of those was NSAM 57. Jerry Connolly, Democrat, Virginia, who chairs the subcommittee overseeing the federal civil service, last week published an op-ed in the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos' CIA rag, calling on Congress to act. He has sought to amend this year's defense bill to prevent a future president from resurrecting Schedule F. Now, let me tell you, every time they want to do something now, they attach it to the National Defense Authorization Act. I want a UFO office and I want to treat them as a threat and I'm Marco Rubio, I'm going to attach it and I'm going to say, you can't get the 800 billion for the Defense Department unless you give me this office. So now they're doing it with everything. And this guy, Connolly from Virginia, he's doing the same thing. Unless you do Schedule F, I'm going to block the NDAA. It's just being used now as the plaything for anybody who wants anything. If you scream up and down that you're going to block NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, which, by the way, is the thing that renews the presidential emergency order from September 11th that we still live under, which, by the way, suspends the Constitution. What we're hearing, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Ted Cruz told Axios they support using a measure like Schedule F to reform the federal bureaucracy and strip civil servants from their positions in crucial government agencies. Trump, when he got in there, realized there's a whole structure that prevents you from doing certain things. You can't make certain moves. Now, you might think his policies were good or bad, but this was a pretty big realization on his part that there's a movement in the Schedule F executive order that he left, which gives him the ability to take some of these out. What he was doing with those students at the end was going through the emergency powers, emergency planning people, and carefully taking them out, along with Esper and all these other people. But he ran out of time. Florida Governor DeSantis and Senator Marco Rubio, notice the names closely there, Rick Scott of Florida and Josh Hawley, wouldn't speak to Schedule F specifically, but they showed openness to the approach and told Axios they think more needs to be done to hold career officials and federal agencies accountable.
Dr. Joseph Farrell is in the chat.
Yes, Joseph.
And has a question.
Okay.
What does DJ think Mr. Trump was trying to accomplish by all the COG replacements?
I think that he had become aware of the COG plot to remove him. And that's something that we discussed because we remember that very interesting film where Trump came out and you said, you know, there's something interesting going on. And Joseph, you noticed it seemed like the background was moving like he was on a ship, which was a weird thing because he was supposedly getting COVID treatment and all the rest. But something had taken place there. There was some move, and there were a number of articles that came out with Nancy Pelosi talking, oh yeah, I met with continuity of government yesterday. It's like they were going to move with it, and probably they were trying to see if Pence would go along or something along that line. When this moved into a different phase and they went with the whole coronavirus mail-in stuff and all the controversy around that, well, it's interesting because the leftovers, Trump was like, oh, this is what they tried to do. I want to go through with a fine-tooth comb and find those people. But the people he sent in to do it, and it is kind of confusing, were totally green, it seemed like. They were college students, and one of them was a little bit older. He was like a grad. He had just graduated, and he was 28. He was a grad student, and the methods, but I went through the ages of the different people, and it was basically like 28, 25, 22, and 19 or something. And these stories had spun around that he had got these college kids together, and I wondered if he didn't need this totally blank slate, clear-eyed group to go in there, give them the facts, and not have them have any cross loyalties or let anything get out. And I think he created his own little unit there of doing this. But the replacements are extensive, and I found at least 75, but I hear there's a lot more. So I don't think that's a small amount. And it is. I think it tells us a lot.
Okay. There's still a lot there. As we said, we'll explain. Our Schedule F, you're going to start hearing more about it on the mainstream media. But this is something that was going on. This was executive order that President Kennedy signed way back when to prevent anybody from taking away the Constitution, like government agencies like the CIA, the FBI, who hated Kennedy. So this does go back quite a ways. So what was Trump actually doing? Now we know there were moles in there. They're claiming there's moles in Mar-a-Lago. But Trump put together a young team to search out the deep state actors, because he actually thought he was going to get elected. He wanted to get the shadow government, who are in opposition of our Constitution, out. You know, what would create such just a disparate reaction by the deep state to go to any lengths and take all risks to go after President Trump and actually raid his home and do what they did. This is a complete violation of this, no matter who you are. I mean, was President Trump at the position when he was in office that he really wanted to try to drain the swamp, move these people out of the way? I mean, to what point? Did he realize that what he was doing could get him JFK'd? I mean, this goes back deep from everything that's taken place right back to the Kennedy assassination. That's why DJ was showing you all that. I mean, I think Trump might have realized he's at the point, and he probably still does realize he's at the point, that if he doesn't do it, he's going to be a target. The question is, how deep is the swamp? Now, for those of you who don't understand this Doomsday thing and the COG and the Cheney connection, we're going to play for you this next segment. I want you to listen closely. Roll it.
I think there were those who thought during the COVID op, we can do this, you know, and I could picture Klaus Schwab back there, like the shock and awe would take them over. But I do feel that they've decided, well, we need to pull in some other factors now. You know, we're going to pull in this situation of a food shortage. We're going to pull in these different aspects of a divided society. You know, we're going to grab the former president and, you know, haul him off in chains to jail. How's that going to look? This is where they're going. And it's very important, I think, to kind of keep our wits about us as we go forward. And believe it or not, I see all kinds of handwriting on the wall as far as the UFO threat aspect goes. Where they take it is going to be pretty interesting for sure. Liz Cheney, this is very interesting. She lost massively her seat in Congress in Wyoming during the primary there, being thumped over 30 points, which is pretty dramatic. That means you're politically useless, especially in your home state. But what's fascinating about this is as soon as that happened, all the news media was like, Liz Cheney, the next president, could she run? And all this stuff about it. Now, usually when somebody loses by over 30 points, you don't think of them as a presidential candidate, especially from a small state like Wyoming. And especially given her track record of going after her own party, Republicans, be very hard to get the nomination. So what is it that they're talking about? Here's some examples of her going after the GOP. Liz Cheney calls GOP very sick, questions whether party can recover. Liz knows damn well through Dick Cheney all about continuity of government because her dad set it up after all. Her dad, Dick Cheney, Darth Vader himself, who, you know, really enjoyed bombing the bejesus out of Iraqi citizens for oil interests, he called Trump the biggest threat to the republic ever, which is kind of weird language, just generally, and also as another Republican. But he was out there, and I started to put the dots together about the COG aspect concerning this, because I said, we know that she knows she's headed for a fall in this primary. So what are they doing with the presidential thing? And it's all the liberal media pushing the presidential part. Here's another thing. Liz Cheney considering presidential run after losing Wyoming GOP primary. See how that doesn't work? You know, like I win and then I think about getting the presidency, not I lose 30 points and I think I can make it to president. You know, even though I just lost as a congressperson, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, does it? So what is it that they're working on? Cheney's defeat comes with a major silver lining, the media says. Really? What's that silver lining besides the $50 million she has? Well, she started to talk about how we've just begun and, we're going to be doing all this. And I believe what she's talking about is being a major player when the COG powers are enacted. And this is how I think we can read between the lines here. I'm going to give you a small snippet, biographical snippet that Dick Cheney wrote when talking about 9/11. And here he says, the U.S. government was functioning. The president was safe. The attack had not succeeded in shutting us down, speaking of 9/11. Which, as we know, there's so many questions about 9/11, and to take it seriously on face value is ridiculous. You can't fly a plane into the Pentagon. There's a lot of weird things in relation to 9/11, but that one always stands out because you can't get near the Pentagon. They have their own sort of air defenses, and it's just never going to happen. One of the interesting things that happened after this explosion took place there is Donald Rumsfeld, who's the defense secretary, who, during a time when a terrorist attack is occurring, there are rules about a defense secretary. They need to go into this secret structure and plan with the president and all this stuff. And what does he do? He shows up on the lawn of the Pentagon taking someone out in a stretcher for the ultimate photo op, right? Just would never happen. So there are a lot of weird things about 9/11. I have a whole collection around it from my conversations with Jim Mars and Peter Dale Scott, and it's pretty well identified that they selected the designated culprits, all of Lee Harvey Oswald, beforehand, and within something like 20 minutes, they knew, oh, these are the 19 guys you're looking for. One of the ways that they knew that, which always grabbed me as hilarious and absurd on the face of it, is there's an FBI agent walking down the streets of Manhattan, and he sees this piece of paper sort of tumbling in the air, and it lands on top of a pile of rocks from the rubble from the 9/11 towers. And he goes over and he's like, what is this? And he picks it up, and you know what? It's a passport from one of those darn hijackers. Well, that's good and handy he found that, because that helped them put the pieces together. So that's the official story, that an FBI agent found a passport of one of the terrorists on top of that rubble. So you can see the nature of this is farcical. But it's dangerous, too, because like the Kennedy assassination, it sits out there swinging in the breeze, and the credibility of the whole nation swings with it. But they were able to amass mighty changes, including the September 11th emergency structure that we live under now, from which they can call continuity of government. And we know the continuity of government was enacted by Dick Cheney on September 11th. And that's how you get the Patriot Act and all those wonderful things like the TSA. This is our friend, Dick Cheney, as vice president, speaking. As we watched television reports in PEOC, it seemed that none of the reporters had been in contact with anyone in the executive branch who could talk authoritatively about what we were doing. Several members of Congress had been on the air, but they were all removed from the business of actually running the country. Someone needed to make a formal statement to the nation, and I knew it couldn't be me. My past government experience, including my participation in Cold War era continuity of government exercises, had prepared me to manage the crisis during those first few hours of 9/11. This is important because he's been identified in many different ways as running the continuity of government program, but that's his only actual admission of being involved with it. So it gives us that background. And indeed, he went off and used the Doomsday Network during 9/11 and then took off into a mountain bunker and came out a month later with the Patriot Act. And that's something, good old Dick. But is for the whole kind of crowned COG queen idea. Let's get that COG thing going, the emergency powers. They need people on the top of that structure. And one of the things that we know, I was looking at this, I wanted to get this security classifications down exactly right. So I got the list. And I want to say how this list only makes sense under certain situations.
Right there. Stop that right there. Okay, so let's look at it this way. There's so many different angles coming at us. DJ likes to bring up the UFO angle. And could that be the last move by the deep state to try to suspend the U.S. Constitution? But what's more important is he explained in there, Marty, about the continuity of government and the Doomsday effect. So these people have been putting this together. Will we hear anything of this on the mainstream media? How many of you actually realize that we're still living under emergency acts, which is renewed every year by each president as they buried it in the National Defense Authorization Act, which is needed to fund the military? I mean, the way the information's out there and the way what we're going to hear now from DJ is about how the information is being scrubbed and censored by the media on the internet. By who? Who's doing it? Why are internet companies even complying? So do you see the intensity of what's coming up against we the people? And this is why, from the outset, we've been using this. This is all you got. You better defend it now. But let's play the censorship piece, and then we'll conclude with a few final questions that we want you to consider. No, just start there.
This is the actual succession in the case that they lose the president. And it's the vice president, then it goes to the Speaker of the House, which is Nancy Pelosi, as we know. The president of the Senate, Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, Defense, Attorney General, and online down it goes, right down to the Secretary of Homeland Security. Now, however, continuity of government works entirely differently. And I want to really show how the Democrats at the end of the Trump administration were pushing the idea that Nancy Pelosi was going to become president as a result of this when they called continuity of government. That's not the way that it works. In continuity of government, the line of succession goes directly to the NORTHCOM commander, and the NORTHCOM commander is the combatant commander of the United States. He takes over and runs martial law in America. That's the way that it would work. So if they called this emergency, that's what we would get, in fact, not Nancy Pelosi or even the vice president at this point. I want to prove this up because you know, I get emails from time to time from people who say, I don't remember them trying to do continuity of government during Trump. And I can appreciate it because actually a lot of it was scrubbed from the internet. And when I went back to find some of it, I was shocked because many of the stories I had bookmarked weren't there anymore. But I had saved a number of them in any case. This is from October 4th, 2020, when Trump announced, I have COVID, right? And they were deciding at this point, can they utilize continuity of government to oust him and do that whole thing? Or should they go with this whole mail-in ballot thing? Secretly, this summer, the White House beefed up planning if Trump got COVID-19. A hospitalized president, a continuity crisis. There it is in October of 2020. Let's go further still. Pelosi, continuity of government in place after Trump tests positive. Here she is. And again, the presumption here that she's working with is she's going to be president. That's not how continuity of government works. The idea being, oh, if Trump and Pence were, you know, both got COVID, then she would take over. No, actually, interestingly enough, the NORTHCOM commander would, General Van Herk. And that still is the case today if they press the button on continuity of government for any reason. And by the way, one of the things that they've included in that and talk about quite often is a cyber attack. Oh, the Russians are cyber attacking us. We need continuity of government. There's a lot of different reasons that they could call it out. And having a weak, senile president in Stepford Biden the way we do now, it's kind of ideal for them to be looking at this. But here's the rest of that article from Pelosi. Reuters, U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi said that plans for continuing the government should President Donald Trump become incapacitated remain in place. Pelosi said she'd been tested and would know the tests of her own results and blah, blah, blah. And then in the article, it goes, the Democratic speaker is next in the line of succession after Vice President Mike Pence. And it's very interesting. They're ignoring the Northcom takeover guy. Now, in terms of these articles disappearing, I'm going to show this one because this article disappeared. It was from Yahoo. And it says, an exhausted Trump's long path to coronavirus. Questions of government continuity arose in ways that haven't in years. Trump's diagnosis amounted to the most serious health threat to an American president. And this is the whole article there. Now, what's interesting is you can try in 90 different ways to get the actual article, and you can't. But the leftover is there, that little vestige of what they were trying to do, and the explanation of the article. When you go there, it'll just blow you into wide open random Yahoo-ness. And I've tried a number of different ways to get that original article, but this is what they were pushing. And there was a reason why they were doing this. Now, the continuity of government structure would place us under Northcom, but it would also give us regional governors, and the regions would be taken over by different military officials through Northcom, and they would divvy up resources and things of this nature. Now, I'm not saying this to scare us and to be like a fear porn thing. What I want to do is give us that clear outline of what they're talking about when they get to emergency powers. And I'm going to show where they were going to exercise emergency powers, and they've had dry runs of doing this. And one of those places is Australia, and it's very...
Is going to COG, which is obviously more militaristic, set up because of JFK's preference for DIA over the CIA?
No, although Kennedy did beef up the ability because of the tensions that were going on with Russia for us to survive a nuclear war. It's true, although he kept lowering the temperature on that and did actually bend over backwards to kind of keep things with Khrushchev on a workable level. His generals really wanted the confrontational thing going on.
How will COG use the military if we get massive defections, bring in outsiders? I'm assuming like UN troops.
This is the interesting thing. Professor Scott makes a good point about this, which is COG in and of itself is just a structure. And that network, the secret network, the Doomsday network, can be used by good people or bad people. But if it gets in the wrong hands, as it has in the past, we've seen, in Kennedy's case, Winston Lawson was the Secret Service agent who used the Doomsday communication network for Dallas for setting up the route that they were on. So he was a clear case of somebody from that Doomsday network who came in and participated in the deep event of Kennedy's assassination. Also had a lot of sketchy recollections that were completely untrue about the incident of the assassination. When you go to Watergate, you're surrounded by COG people. John Dean, who is Nixon's lawyer, he had just come out of continuity of government, and his girlfriend had also worked in continuity of government. One of the main Watergate burglars had just come out of the COG. So we're seeing these people around these events. Then when you get to 9/11, you've got Rumsfeld and Cheney who set the structure up, restructured it in the 80s, and they're utilizing it and calling COG when you get the September 11th attacks. So
there you go. Rumsfeld and Cheney and other players in the game. It appears everybody wants to rule the world, even if they don't know the rules to rule the world. What rules? Unconstitutional rules, secret rules set up by secret forces, all trying to suspend this. Do you understand now the importance of this? And he got into there a little bit, and we're going to put up the link to his whole video for any of you that want to watch it. And we highly do. When you have the time, you may want to listen to DJ. He does a lot of deep digging. See, none of this is theory. This is all investigated. Everything he read to you from Cheney's statements, These are all actual statements. These people made them. They're telling you what they're going to do. It's up to you to believe that they're coming. And they're actually going to try and do this. I mean, he mentions Australia, and Australia was let's call it a test run at tyranny. The way they we had so many clips we showed how they're actually beating on the people for not wearing masks and stuff like that. We'll have more about that in part 2. But with the whole mandates, and even Canada, when they were protesting, the truckers were in Canada. People were losing their jobs. They had a problem with accepting something that their body they didn't want to take. We have the talk of UN troops. That's been around for decades. People have been talking about it. So none of this is theory, but what it is a conspiracy. Conspiracy against this. When you talk about these troops, UN, are they just going to be the willing enforcers of tyranny? You know, the rank and file that are destroying our country by sitting back, allowing all this to happen, while our own government's trying to disarm and weaken the people. They're trying to make them docile. They're going after any form of masculinity, any form of conversation, through censorship. They don't want us to fight back. They're drugging people. People are running to get meds because they can't handle what they know subconsciously is taking place, because they can see it. They can feel it every day. There's more pressure on them. So they run and hide from it. They try to sell, oh, we're going to stay positive. Okay. I'm all for it. I'm positive. I'm positive that what has taken place hasn't taken place yet, because whoever these shadow people are, whatever they're up to, and many explanations there, many reasons behind it, they still believe there's enough fighting with the people. So, I mean, are we ever going to know what this so-called biscuit is that everyone's been referring to? Could that have been the reason for Mar-a-Lago raid? Now, that caused the FBI DOJ to completely risk violating the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. And they knew that it would turn around and result in a serious blowback from the American people. Or enough of them that they don't dare move forward yet. I still don't believe the mainstream media will ever inform us. But one thing's for sure, we've been purposely thrown into a constitutional crisis to use as a cover-up for decades of crimes of sedition and possibly treason being committed against our founders' form of government and we the people. The question is going to come down to is, will we accept this new form of rule? And it is, like I said in the beginning, about how we are coming to you from the Merrimack Valley in Massachusetts, where the shot heard around the world is fired at the Concord Bridge, and the revolution against tyranny that would change the world and gave birth to a new guideline on how the human race would allow itself to be ruled or not to be ruled by tyrannical kings, queens, dictators, emperors, or czars. I want you to keep that in mind, and I hope that we made this quite clear about this. Like Trump said, they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just standing in the way. So what does Trump know? Is it in his head? Was that just a warning that they sent to him about even thinking about continuing doing what he's doing? Because what he was doing, that's factual. About getting people in to try to flush out deep state actors. They had to come at him. They had to. They had no choice. He was going to expose them all and return the government to the people. I saw an interesting clip. I think it was on a show, news show tonight, about how when Trump ran against Hillary, the Hillary shirt said, "I'm with her." When Trump came out and was campaigning, he told the people, "I'm with you. No matter what flaws, better really consider about what do you want." So in part two, we're going to show some short clips related to our rights and the attack on them before we move to part three in Rand Paul's hearing. That hearing led to a lot of actions. Could have actually forced a hand at Mar-a-Lago because he exposed a lot against Dr. Fauci and others in our government. So there's a lot of desperation going on, and we're just here to inform you. We're not telling you what to think, but you better start thinking. But that will conclude part one.